All right, welcome back. We are Game 3004 in the winter 2021 semester, and it is week 10, part 2 of our broadcast. And we're talking about how to do data persistence with scriptable objects. How do we do that? Well, we're going to start with the starter. The starter from this week is just Lab 5B or 5A from last week. So that's over here, Lab 5B final. All right, so I'm going to download this thing, and I think I already have a lot of stuff open. Let's go to this. There we go. So I've already downloaded this one, Lab 5B final. I made week 10A. We're going to just do week 10B. So again, I'm just going to extract here. You can also use your previous lab and build off that if you want. Just wanted to make it easier for us to do. And just before we start, I'm going to pop this into VS Code. We can close off these things. All right. And what I'm looking to do here is just change this so it says Lab 6. And I want to do all my GitHub stuff now, so it's out of the way. So, not there. Git init, git add dot, git commit -m, initial commit. And then what I want to do is make a repository online. Week 10B final, sure. And we'll grab all these things, and we'll go back to here and paste. And that should put everything up online for our Lab 6. Okay, now we're going to close off VS Code, and we're going to open up Unity Hub, which is updated lately. And I'm going to add in that project, which is inside of our desktop. Now, one thing to do when we're loading this up and when we start this off is I want you to remember always when we're downloading a project from GitHub that quite often your settings are, your build target is wrong, and you have to change your build target for mobile again. So the first thing we're going to do today is change our build target. I'm also going to just close some of these things down just to make it so that it's a little easier for us to get to what we're looking for today. Keep that one up. We need this one. I don't need Ubisoft Toronto right now. So hopefully you guys have a chance to do that if you're interested. I think for most people, I think it's a great opportunity for you to try stuff out. Wow, that loaded pretty quick. All right, so I'm going to go into my scenes and into main here. And this is using the lighting model from last week. And again, all I want to do is change this. I'm going to go to File, Build Settings, and let's retarget for Android and switch platforms. So that's the first step. And in this way, what we'll be able to do is after we get this done, we can start testing everything for our mobile platform. So I'm going to close down some additional windows so I don't have as much clutter. How are we doing that? That thing's still going. All right, so we've done that. Let's take a look at my available devices. I've got two. I've got my emulator and my actual device. And I'm also going to use Visor, like we said before, for to cast my phone, so we can see it on both the phone and the emulator. Some of you, I know, have expressed that you don't have a phone, and that's fine. You don't have to do it with an actual phone. I'm okay with the emulator. I'm just thinking that it might be a good place to check to make sure that it's working live. All right, so that is, we switched. Let's also make sure that from a player settings perspective, it's all preserved. We know it is, because if I scroll down, you can see that a lot of the stuff we had before, this has to be changed. So this has to be lab 6. And so too does this, just to be for completeness, not because it has to do it. Resolution, presentation, all that stuff is the same. Other settings are all the same. We can now build for mobile. Let's build for our mobile device emulator. So again, I'm going to select the emulator first, and then I'm going to go and do a file, save project, and then a build and run. I'm going to choose new folder. I'm going to choose builds. Again, this is all review. You guys should have done this now many times, but it's an opportunity for us to go through and review these things over and over again. So again, curious for the guys who are online. So did you actually build for mobile yet? I know you're working with your procedurally generated stuff. Have you tried mobile and see how it performs? Yeah, I know. I'm building. That's why. Whenever I build, I always break it up. No, I'm saying, did you build for mobile yet? Is what I asked. No, I would try it sooner than later. Just in order for you to see what the effect will be. Is it really terribly slow? Is it somewhat workable on an average device emulator? What does it look like? Kind of thing. All right. When you do your chunks, do you do them with if I'm not wrong, right? How far you can see in a certain radius, I'm guessing? Or is it only your view frustum? Okay. So you have a number that you're going to generate. All right, so let's take a look. So right now we have this. We can move forward and back. We can look up and down, left and right. Shadows are pretty crappy. We can jump, but there's a problem with jumping. It's an infinite jump. No one said anything last time. But the reason why it's an infinite jump is because I removed the requirement for you to do which isn't bad actually for testing, because then I can give myself a chance to move forward and stuff, and actually move and jump, which is not bad. But we have our mini map that works okay, and you can see that works. The overlay works nicely, and all that kind of stuff. So spam jumping, I know, yeah, I didn't realize, but I took it because I took it outside of checking for gravity or checking for like a ground check. Then this would totally work. So we have to kind of change that later. Maybe not today. All right, because we might need it for trying it out. So we've checked that out. Let's also test on our device to make sure that works on a local device. And this is an incremental build, so it shouldn't be an issue building for the device. Again, what we want to do is we want to check to see if it works here and not just on an emulator. So Emulator's okay, but like we said, it's always best to check on a real device and see what it does. I found that there's the changes that we made so far have been it's really been helpful to have a device around, because then we can look at it and go, it's just not working as I'd like to. I think this would be better if we did it this way. Or, the user interface needs to be larger, or it needs to be more adaptive, or whatever, what have you, right? So now the great thing is the spamming still works, which is good. And it gives me a chance to, play with the buttons and see how that works. We can use this. So this is pretty good. I think it's usable for me to have the, kind of the, it's amazing how it cuts out though for the mini map. As I jump too high, if I jump way too high, like spam it like crazy, then it just goes away. That's pretty cool. So otherwise it works okay, it deploys nicely, and we're good to go. All right, so that's where we want to check. All right, so now what we want to do, the goal of today is saving and loading with scriptable objects, but we need a bit of an interface for us to do that. Let's go in here and change it from game to simulator. And we want to go with something like we've done before. I'm going to use a Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus just for sizing purposes. And I'm going to choose the safe area on the left side just to make sure that things are good with other phones. I'm going to take the simulator and put it in the bottom so I can see both the simulator and as well as the scene. And I'm going to go into 2D mode so I can build a bit of a UI so we can support saving and loading and all that stuff. So I'm going to go into Canvas and let's make this smaller and that bigger so it's kind of balanced in terms of size. There we go. I want to hide my my mini map. So in the canvas, I'm going to go to mini map border and hide it just to start, because I think that's the important part. And then what I want to start doing is thinking about putting a panel, which is going to be used as a control panel, and some kind of button to make the control panel appear. All right, so I think I need those things. So let's add that in. So I'm going to go canvas. I'm going to add in a new UI panel. By default, the panel is the entire size of this screen, but we don't have to keep that. We can make it so that it's thinner. And I want to kind of make it so that it's about half the size from here to here. And I'm just eyeballing it here in terms of width, something like that. And obviously not that high. Maybe it'll come down to here in terms of control. So it'll cover one of our buttons, but that's okay because this is where the panel will come down from the top, right, to do what I need to do. Just to be, for completeness. So the panel right and bottom, it talks about that, but we don't want this to be expanded. We want it to be kind of at the top so that it'll be anchored at the top part. This is where it's going to be coming from. So that's why I'm going to make it like that. All right, cool. So that is the panel and we can see the width and the height. Let's make it so that there's some decent numbers. 1480, I think is the right number, and something like 725, just because that's how it looks. And we want to make sure that the X position is 0, starting off 0. And the Y position, let's start that also at, the Y position should be something like negative 360, just so that it's down in here. All right, great. So that is what it's going to look like, but we need some color. Let's add just some other basic colors. I'm just going to go with a brownish color, and it's got to be fully opaque, not so dark. Maybe something that looks closer to brown, looking down here to get the actual color happening. Kind of a brownish panel that comes down. Maybe it's a little bit, I want to make it a little bit bigger, slightly more. So from a height maybe of 750. Now that I'm looking at it, just give myself more real estate. All right, so that is my panel. Let's make sure that this is 375. It's not bad. All right, so that is 375. The panel's this wide. I want some buttons on the panel. So the panel, let's call this panel control panel. And let's add some buttons. So Let's make some buttons on the panel. And that'll be the first button. This button here will be the load button. And we'll make this anchored to the top, this part right here. And I want to make it so that the load button's text starts off with a font size of 40, and we'll make it so that it's best fit between 40 and 80, depending on the size of the interface. So 40, and one thing we can do is we can grab some of these and expand it, undo, undo. I meant grab the button itself and expand it. That's what I want to do. Until we have a reasonable button. Now, like, you got to look at the button that's in here. Remember that when I use my fingers in the real device, that my fingers are just about the size of this thing. All right, that's how it turned out to be on the device. So you want to make the kind of the height about what this looks like, or in and around there, that space. So if you notice, the height is 256 kind of pixels, and my button size right now for my load button is about 100. Let's make it 100 for my height, and my width, let's make that something like 400. So something that's decent. Let's also center it in the 0 in the X position, and in the Y position, I'm just going to grab the move tool. I'm going to move it to some value, let's say 120 from the top, or somewhere maybe 130 from the top. So a negative 130. There's the button. And let's rename this thing so it actually says load, not just the button. Load. I'm not even going to change the values here or anything. And let's Control D to make another button. And we'll call this the save button. This will be centered. The save button will say save. And it'll be centered around the middle, so the center area, right? That's going to be its, sorry, the save button will be centered around the middle. That's going to be its anchor. I'm going to move this to exactly the middle. So this will be 0, 0 for the save button. And then I'll Control D again. And we'll add a pause button. Pause button in our little menu. And we'll need this to say pause. Pause. And we'll bring that down. Well, first of all, we'll take the pause button and we will anchor it to the bottom. And we'll take this down here, and it'll be the opposite of, I think it was 130, to give us nice spacing. So load, save, and pause, spaced out nice. And if you're not happy with this, like if you think the button should be bigger, and I think they should be, like actually taller, you can always select all of the 3 buttons at the same time and go to the height and change that to like a height of 150 if you like for the buttons to be bigger from a pressing perspective. I want to be able to press those and it's going to be okay, right? Again, we can play with the values. These are very basic Unity buttons. We don't care. This is just to make sure we have some kind of interface to come down to press, right? On that, so this is the interface. The control panel will be turned off. Then I'll click it to turn back on again. I could include things like animations and so on, and if we have time later, we will. But I need a button to activate the control, so I'm going to use the Y button as a template. So Control D, and let's call this the I button. So I button, and we'll put an I in there, like for information. So there isn't really an I button on a controller, but you know, for now, it'll be the I button. It'll say I, and let's make sure that the button itself for the I button is white, just so that way we can have some kind of control that makes sense. And I'll pull this over. So again, we'll pull it over so we're inside the safe area, and it should be centered around the top left corner, this up here. But that means that when I visualize what it looks like, so I'm trying to visualize the safe area here, something that looks like this. Let's see what the values look like. Negative 1226, 1225, and something like 555 on the top. That's what it looks like. Well, it's kind of overlapping with the the health bar, and I like to move this health bar over, and we don't care if it's occluded just temporarily. So maybe something like this and down a little bit more, something like that. And I wouldn't mind making it even bigger. So I think the health bar is a little bit too small for the size of the interface. Just going to move it here. It doesn't matter if it's occluded, like I said, when the button comes down, when this thing comes down this panel, but something like that. And let's take a look at see what that position is looking like. Negative 115 looks pretty good to me. Maybe even more. I'm just trying to balance the kind of space here and the space in there. It looks almost good. Maybe less than one, maybe less than that. On the x-axis, 620 on the x-axis. Maybe that's too much. 625. No, 630. No, should be over here more. So less. So 605. Yep. 605 minus 115 is where I'm putting my health bar at a 1.5, 1.5 in terms of sizing. So it looks okay. All right, so what I want is when I click on the I button, then this thing will show up. So by default, I will have my canvas turned, this control panel invisible. So it'll be turned off like so. And the controls for this, for this thing to turn on will be inside the player controller. So player, we have the player controller here, the player behavior, and let's bring up some scripts. And what I want is access to my control panel. So we'll say header, control panel. Maybe we'll have other things in the control panel, not right now, but maybe we will. A public game object, and we'll call this control panel. All right, public game object control panel. And then what I want is for me to pull down a reference to the control panel by going here inside the UI and dragging it up. And then what I want to do inside of the coding is I want to wire up that button. So I'm going to say something like public void on I button pressed. And we want to say that the control panel dot set active is not control panel active in hierarchy. So it'll be a toggle, just like we've done before. All right, so that's nothing new. And then what we can do is in the I button, I know I'm going fast, but I want to just get this done. So in the I button, the player behavior is correct. We've copied it from the Y button. We got to select a different function. So instead of Y button, we want to say the I button. And then for us to test it, we can just press play. And if I press the I button, then it should show up and go away. Pretty simple. So that is this functionality. So the I button shows up. And what I want to do is first work on the pause ability. The pause ability will work in here. I'm just going to turn the control panel on for us, ugly as it is, just to make sure that when I click one of these buttons, different things happen. I'm going to bury the code for this one inside of the control panel itself. So I'm in the scripts. I'm going to make a new C# script. We're going to call this control panel. And in the control panel, I want to say that, hey, control panel, where are you? Here it is. Let's add a new component called control panel. There it is. And what I want to do here is have reference, as an example to different pieces. So for now, on the bottom, I want to wire up the buttons. So I'm going to say that public void on load button pressed, a public void on save button pressed. I'm just wiring those up now, even if they're empty, just to get that part done. And a public void on pause button toggled. Okay, so those are the things I have. 1, 2, 3. And then I can wire up the buttons. So I'll choose the first button, the load button, and I'll make a new event, and I'll drag and drop the control panel on top of it. Again, go to the function, go to control panel, go on, load button pressed. And the next one will be the save button. So save button, I click on a function, I drag and drop the control panel in there, and then from there I'm going to choose the control panel on save button pressed. And then finally the pause button, which is the same thing. So pause button, make a new click event handler, drag and drop the control panel on top of that. And then go down here, go to control panel, and then say on toggle, on pause button toggle, which is this one. Okay, so we have all of them wired up now. So they're all going to work when we kind of put it together. All right, nice. So that's the first step. The second thing is how we're going to pause. I'm going to start with pausing first. There's many ways to do this. One of them is to turn off the time, to fiddle with the time, the system time, and the game time. I'm going to use it in terms of disabling scripts. That's my way of doing it for today. So in order for me to do that, I need to get reference to scripts. So I'm going to do that here. I'm going to say that I really want a couple of lists. I want a public list of type nav mesh agents. I'm going to turn those off. Right? And we're going to call this agents, right? And I also want a public list of mono behaviors, right? So public list of mono behavior type, which I'm going to call scripts. So we're just going to kill some scripts and some agents, turn them all off. And we want to do this as automatically as possible. And just to be good, we know we're going to access the player here. So chances are I need a public player behavior access. So let's call this the player. And let's wire them all up here. So I'll say that player is equal to find object of type and player behavior. We need that. So we need to modify the player and do a couple things there, keep track of that stuff. And then the other thing I'd like to do is let's make sure that the agents are wired up as well. So the way agents would work is it'd be agents is equal to find objects of type nav mesh agent. And what we want to do is we want to convert it to list is what we want to do. And that adds in the link library. It's a great little library from Microsoft that basically allows us to do queries, right? And it's really good. We can convert a lot of little
I heard some static.
And we're okay now?
Yeah, I heard you there.
And did I just suddenly stop, or was I stopped the whole time?
It was sudden for me.
Okay, so it was good. So did you get to this part where
I was just talking about the agents find objects?
Yeah, okay, so that's great. Thank you. It wasn't so bad. All right, so yeah, so agents, and again, find objects of type nav mesh agent. Player is finding the player. I want to get reference to this, and this now is I'm going to do a for each loop. Thank you for that, Michael. For each loop where I look at all the, and I can do this too. I can say find objects of type, and then we're going to use things like enemy behavior. Enemy behavior is also a script type, and it's mono behavior, right? We know that. So I can say for every enemy, right? For every enemy in enemies, we want to say that I want to add the scripts of that particular enemy onto my list of scripts. All right, so that's why we want to do that. So scripts, that'll take all the enemy scripts plus all the nav meshes belonging to the enemies, because those are different things. And then the player behavior is going to be something that I want to add in. So I'm going to say scripts.add, and then we want the player to be added into that. So we want to disable the player, as well as we want to disable the camera for the player. So I'm going to say that I'm going to do this once, so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to say find object of type camera controller. So that's going to be the one that I want to disable. And I want to do this once. So that's all the scripts. And what this does is it gets references to everything. And then when I press the pause button, what I want is, well, there's two things. One, let's make sure we have some kind of a way of telling that we're paused. So we're just going to use a Boolean for that. So public bool, and we'll call that is game paused, which we'll set to false just to start off with. So is game paused is false. And then what we'll say is when we click on is pause button toggled, we'll say is game pause is equal to not is game pause, that old trick, right? So whatever it is, it's not. And that's okay. And what we're going to say is that when we want to show the panel, so the showing the panel does the same thing. We show the panel, but don't show the panel. And then this will basically pause the game, not pause the game. And what we want to do is we want to do a for loop. So for each, and for each inside of our agents collection, right? We want to say for every agent in agents, then we want to say that agent.setActive agents.enabled is equal to, now if is paused, is game pause is true, then agents enabled is false. So we want to say not is game paused, right? So if is game paused is true, then agents enabled is false, right? So that makes sense, right? And the same thing goes for another little for each loop. Again, you can do this different ways, but I'm just doing it quickly so that it solves our small problem. And for every, script and scripts, as an example, I'm going to basically say that script.enabled, same thing, is equal to not is game paused. So the same thing. So that pauses everything. It disables a script or enables a script based on whether or not the pause button toggle is pressed. Let's see if that's true. And let's run it. So if I run this thing now and I want to look and see the state of the control panel, this is right here. If I click pause, then that pauses everything. I should not be able to move, right? Or jump, or turn on and off anything. It should be completely paused, right?
Why don't we just set the timescale?
We could,
instead?
yeah, we could set the timescale. You can do a lot of stuff. I'm just doing it this way. It's done. Nothing to do anymore, Michael. It's over. I'm just turning off scripts. So some other things are still running, but yes, you can turn the timescale. There's like a lot of stuff you can do. Different ways of doing this kind of stuff. I'm just making sure like all scripts are disabled, including like, whatever, navigation, everything. All right, so that's the ones I want. But the problem with this system is I can't tell if I'm pausing it other than looking here. And I want some kind of message to show me. So let's do that next. So right in here, what I want to do is I want to add in another panel. Again, simple UI. We're not going to go too much into craziness. That's why I'm going so fast. So I don't want to waste your time because this UI is obviously temporary. All right, so again, I want to grab this and pull it down. And from the top here, I want to pull this down. So I'm going to use a separate panel for this. And the reason for this is because I know that I won't be able to see the message that I pop underneath this thing. So that's where I want the message to be, kind of somewhere underneath here. And again, I want to center the panel on the bottom, this part right here. And so let's make this 0 and -100. Something that looks like that. And then what I want to do is this is going to be called the pause label panel. So the pause label panel, I want to add a label. Let's add that in. So add a new UI text. There it is. And let's make that the pause label. Pause label. So yeah, Michael, if you wanted to do it without disabling scripts, totally fine. I'm fine with that. If you want to do it for lab.
Because if you press the jump button while it's paused, and then you unpause, it'll jump.
Correct. Oh, you mean like in your game or in my game?
In yours right now.
Okay. And that's because it will retain the my clicks, right? So let's continue here. But you're right, yeah. Otherwise, timescale. If you turn the timescale off, it won't do anything. Let's get to the next part. So I want to change the pause label, and again, I want to go with 40 and 80. So I want to go best fit 40 and 80. And let's just realign that so that it says what it's supposed to say. I'm just going to modify this. And again, you want to make it so it's centered and that it's centered. As an example, something like looks like this, and it's going to say game paused, game pause. We can make it bolder, like so. And what we want is for the position to be 0, 0, as well as the width and the height doesn't really matter here. I mean, if you really want to be stickler, you can always just do something that looks like 740, just to make it even, so it's not weird numbers. And same thing with this width and height. I could make it so that it is 940 and 130, which is probably okay. Okay, so that's kind of everything that I would do for the game pause. We're going to make it so that it is not showing, and then when we click the pause button, it's going to show. But I need a reference to the pause label panel, so let's do that in code. So again, going back into this again, lots of ways to do this. You might agree, disagree, it's totally fine. So I'm just going to make a public game object called the pause label panel. And the pause label panel, what I'm going to do is, just like I did before, when I pause the game, I'm going to say that the pause label panel dot set active is equal to the, if it is true, then I want to put the is game paused, because when it's true, I want to show it, and when it's not true, I don't want to show it. So that's what this does. And I want to just drag and drop a reference to the panel in my control panel right here. So like so. And then when we run it, at least we get some feedback now. When I click on pause, it says game paused, and it also shows it here. Now I have an actual something that can show me what's going on here. But to your point, if I click this and unpause it, then I'm going to jump. All right, so that is a little bit of a pause method. Not exactly perfect, but at least it allows us to pause. And I put that in there because I want to be able to move and select the game and pause so these guys don't come around and save. That's really why it's there. Okay, so awesome. So now this is what we have, but I want to enable and I want to do the biggest part, which is the scriptable objects. For that, I'm going to add a new folder. So create new folder, and we're going to call this data. And this is where I'm going to put my scriptable objects in here. So I'm going to say right click or inside the data folder. I want to make a new C# script, which I'm going to call the player data SO for scriptable object. Okay, so that's where the player data is going to go. For scriptable objects, if I double click here, one thing that we can't do is they're not mono behavior. Some of you know this already. They are actually of different type scriptable object. And scriptable objects don't have a start and update method because they're more like structs than anything else. So they enable us to do any kind of data handling we want. And for this, what we want is to think about the things we want to save. If it's a player data SO, a player data scriptable object, we want to save some kind of player data. So one of the things I want to save is the transforms. So let's do that. So we'll say, we'll do a header. And we'll say that this is the player transform properties, right? And what that's going to look like is that I'm going to do a public vector3 player position. And I'm also going to do a public quaternion player rotation. Okay, so that's what I probably would do. Again, you can do whatever you like. I'm also going to hold off maybe some player attributes. And you could think about these as like strength or health or something. And I'm going to say public. It'll be an integer value for player health. So those are the things that I care about right now. You might care about other ones, but this is what I care about. To complete my scriptable object, I need to create a menu. So you can do that here, where I say something like create asset menu. And in the asset menu, I want to have a file name. So that will be something like player data. And then followed by the menu, right? So followed by the menu, which would be something like the menu name would be data, let's say, and then followed by the order if you want. But the menu should also include the name of the data, which is player data. So that's kind of what it should look like. So file name, string, menu, and I think I need the file name key there, if I'm not wrong. So file name, I think I need to do that. File name, and I also need to do the menu. Pretty sure. Menu name, yeah. Pretty sure I need to do that. Okay, so that is the asset that I've created. And once I've done this, then what this does is it creates a couple of, it describes the asset that I'm going to be creating. This is not the asset itself for those who've never done scriptable objects, but rather it is a description of what the asset's going to be when I create it with the asset menu. So if I go here, save this, and if I go back to the data folder and I want to add a scriptable object now, add the asset, right click, and I want to say create, and I'm going to go to data. That's a new menu that I made, player data. And then what this is going to do is going to show me the data that I have here. And notice it holds the headers as well here in this asset. Okay. One thing we don't have is health. And we have a health bar screen space. Let's modify the player so that it does have health. So player, I'm going to go to player behavior for a second. And on the top of player behavior, we're going to add in player attributes. So same kind of thing, header, player attributes. And one of the things that I want is health, which is going to be public int health. And we also want a public int or public health bar reference, right? So we want to modify the health bar when the health changes. So a public health bar, we'll call this health bar. Okay, so that's something that we want as well. So health and health bar, I need a health bar reference here. So instead of finding a health bar, I'm just going to get it for now. So in my health bar, I'm going to drag and drop the health bar that's in the health bar screen space here, like so. And I'm going to set my health to 100. All right. And what I want to do is when the health bar is changed, when the health is changed, the health bar should be updated. I don't want to take damage. I just want to use it as a testing value. So I'm going to go to the health bar, go to definition for health bar, and I'm going to add in a new function that's very similar to take damage, but it's just going to say set health. So where I just set the health value, whatever the health value is, I want to set it to the health bar slider. So I can just set the health. Okay, so that's the way it's going to be. Okay, and that gives me a mechanism for setting the health temporarily as opposed to taking damage with some kind of attack. Next week, maybe we'll do this. All right, so now that I have that, then what I can do is inside of my player behavior script, I can say that health, whatever the health bar is going to change according to the health. We'll just do that every frame for now because we just want to make sure that it works. So we'll say that health bar dot set health is going to be the health of the player, whatever the health of the player is. And if we were to run this now inside of our code, so let's say we just run it locally. We're just testing locally right now anyway. And then if I, let's pop this off. That's something we have to get away. If I change this to 80, then I should see that immediately change here, which is what I want. So I can slide this one around and I can get a value. I can also set up health as a slider, and that's not a bad idea if I'm going to be doing testing. So I can say that at the top here, I want a slider, which is a range, just like we've done before. I can say that this is a range, and the range is going to be from minimum to maximum, which is 0, let's say to a maximum of 100. All right, so that's kind of the things that we want to put in there. And now it'll change into a slider, right, where we can have a little slider here, and that's what we want. So when we press play, we can modify the health of the player here. And let's just get rid of this again. And so that we can do this kind of thing. Okay, cool. Awesome. So that gives us a mechanism then of loading and saving. And I'm going to go back to my control panel here and start programming the onload button pressed and the on-save button pressed. So how would the onload button pressed then work? Well, we need a reference to the scriptable object. So again, go here. And I want the player data SO, which we're going to call player data. That's going to get a reference to the scriptable object, which is this type. I could get a reference to it automatically, and for the control panel, I recommend that we do so. So something like player data is equal to find object of type player data SO, right? So that'll be the one. Now this is it's tricky. I got to talk about this being tricky because this is not in this find object of type is in the scene. And I don't have this object in the scene. Let's just not do that. Sorry. Otherwise, it just won't work. You can load it. You can use put that in the resource folder and a bunch of other stuff. But for now, I'm not going to do that. So, and let's not show this for now. So let's just click the control panel and make it invisible for now, just to clear that up. But the player data SO is going to come from the data folder. So drag and drop. Okay, so that is your control panel. I got my player data, la la la. Let's go back here, and now that we have our player data, let's do something with it. So on load, what's going to happen is I'm going to say something that looks like this. I'm going to say, hey player, let's take the player controller, and because we're using a player character or character controller, we're going to say that the character controller dot enabled is, we just did this trick before, is equal to false. Again, you can also move it in different ways, but we're also, this is just the easiest way, enabled is equal to true. So this basically, when I move my character around, I'm going to disable the controller, move them, and then set it up again. All right, so then what I can do is I can say that the player.transform.position is going to be equal to the player data dot player position. All right, and the player.transform.rotation is equal to the player data.player rotation. Now they're both quaternions, so this should be fine. And then finally, the player.health should be equal to the player data.player health. And that takes care of all the stuff that we load from the scriptable object. Okay. And on save button, it's the other way around. So we kind of say something like, all right, player data dot player position is equal to the player dot transform dot position, whatever we do it. And the player data dot player rotation is equal to player dot transform dot rotation. And finally, the player data dot player health is equal to the player dot health. So that kind of does everything we need and we'll need. And that is your very simple code for saving and loading a little bit of data. But there's a problem. And we're going to talk about the problem. First, I'll save it. I'll put it up there. I'll put it up on GitHub. So we'll do this iteration. And then I'll show you the problem. And we'll try and deal with the problem together. All right, let's do this. Next part. So let's run it and see how it works. So again, we've gone and done most of it right now. And we'll press play. And if I back up and I look around somewhere, like over here, because I've got really this, I'm looking over in this corner. And let's just pause the game so we don't have any problems with the enemies coming at me. And let's take a look at the scriptable object here. And I'll save. You can see that the values are preserved, right? And if I change the values, so let's say, for example, something like 60, so I want the health to be lower. Let's say I took some damage or whatever when I saved. And let's unpause, and let's take this panel away and jump around. So we'll say, oh, well, looky. So I want to move around and look around. My enemy's trying to find me. Well, yeah, they're right next to me. Okay, so jump, jump, jump. And yes, we're going to fly over here and fly away, for away. And then I got to a corner, but I'm alive. And I want to look at the stairs here. And oh man, they're coming at me. I know they're coming at me. They're almost at me. Well, let's load the game. Load. And now let's see if that did what it's supposed to do. And it does. Right, so that works totally. It loaded back where I went to. But, my friends, there's a problem. And you don't see it yet, but let's do the transfer. So File, Save Projects. And let's go File, Build Settings, and Build for Mobile. Right, the big test is this, right? So let's build for the emulator and build and run. Hopefully I won't cut out too much with this one. Again, this is doing a incremental update, so it shouldn't be so bad. All right, there it is. Let's open it up and see what it looks like. We can see that we're here. I'm going to load immediately. Boom, we're there. Look at that. So it kind of totally worked, right? And let's save the new position. So I'm going to, jump, 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 and we're going to move forward and jump, 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 and let's move forward again so that we're facing the stairs. And let's look down at the stairs here. So we're looking down at the stairs, and I want to save my new position. Let's pause the game so see that pausing works. And I want to save this position with this orientation. Save. Awesome. And let's get back into unpausing the game and move back. So let's move back. Hey, goodbye. And move over here. And we'll move this way and jump, jump, jump. Where we'll go over here, somewhere in front of the brick wall. And when these guys come at me, when they will, right, eventually we're just going to load and see if we can flash there in the game. So there they are. Okay, I'm going to load. And yay, it worked. We're so happy. But are we? What if I close the game off? So now the game is closed, right? Which means we shut down the app, right? And I want to run it again. So I run the game again. And my thoughts are, if I just press load here, so I go to A here and I want to load, then I'm back to where I was supposed to be. But actually, this is not what we saved. Remember this, we saved looking at the stairs, not looking at this. So what happened? Well, my friends, what happened was we're able to save in real time, but we cannot modify the scriptable objects outside of real time. That sucks. That's not what we wanted, right? There must be another solution out there. What was that?
In the editor, it was modified though.
Oh, I modified it. It'll modify it too. In real time, we can modify it as we're running and play in real time. We can modify this. We can save it and everything. But between loads, it will fail. If I was to shut down the actual app, like shut it down, like turn it off, right, and reload it again, like a rough reload, or we restart my phone or something, it's back. It's back to what the original ones was. That's not persistent data. That's just real-time data, right? So we don't want this. Instead, what we want to be able to do is save it somewhere else. But this is a good step because we still need scriptable objects. It's just we don't want to do the saving step that I'm going to show you every time I save, or every time I load. Every time I save, yes, but not every time I load, because loading can take a while, especially if you have a lot of data. A good example of that is Russ wants to save the state of his world. Okay, if Russ wants to save the state of his world with every voxel and every object that you have physically, that's a lot of data, right? So think about me making a scriptable object like that. I may want to make multiple scriptable objects, one for pickups, one for enemies, one for the player data, a bunch of little things that I want to load and save. And that's great in real time. But what happens if I turn my phone off or I turn my app off? All that data is gone. So the answer, first of all, let's put this on GitHub. This is the first iteration, file, save project. And let's close off this thing. So exit. And I want to go back and put this up on GitHub. So, and we can talk about alternatives and why this didn't work. This would work great on a desktop. Desktop, it would work perfectly. But unfortunately, this is not desktop, this is mobile, and there's restrictions. Same thing with WebGL. It will not work properly with WebGL the way this is done. You have to do other things to make it work. All right, so so that is a problem. Okay, but we can make it better. Let's try this out. So cd space and week 10b, git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say that we've added basic saving loading mechanism, right? So that's basic git push. We don't care about the pausing. That's not really, that's just there for testing. Reset, right? All right, so that is this. Let's go back to Unity Hub and fix our problem. So we had a problem. So there's something called player preferences, and that really exists on Android and iOS. So player preferences is player prefs is what you want. Player prefs, what it is a class that stores, like it says, player preferences between game sessions. It can store only these three primitive values: string, floats, and integers. That's it, okay? And that's not great. But what it does is it creates a mechanism, some kind of mechanism to save data, right? And that's what we're going to use. We're going to use player preferences because we're not using a database here. Obviously, the best would be for us to have some kind of database that we can load and save more data than these basic things. But this is how it works. We have some kind of get float, get int, get string, and set float, set int, set string with a save function. So that's what we're going to do. All right, let's get that done. Can you serialize an object into JSON? Well, yeah, it's a string. So yeah, so theoretically, Michael, that's a great solution. You can serialize anything in a string, right, and then deserialize. But let's just talk some basics, right, instead of serializing and deserializing. But that'd be an amazing option, right, because without actually storing data. Because remember, storing binary data, that's limited on different platforms. Example, mobile, or even something like the web, it's limited. But on a desktop, no problem. I can store as many files as I want on a desktop. I have full access, right? But not so on mobile and not so on WebGL. All right, so let's think about how to do this in other ways. All right, so we want to be able to store it in player preferences, and the way I would do that is in my scripts. So again, what I want to do is what we've already done. I'm going to go into this, and what I want to do is I want to create two methods. One of them that's going to start on or launch on start, and the other one that's going to run every time we click save. Okay, so the two methods are, of course, so we'll make them public for now. Public void, and we'll say something like load from player preferences. So big name, but it doesn't matter. And we'll also have a public void save from player preferences. All right, so save and load. And then in our load from player preferences, and the save from player save to is actually what it should say, not. So what we're going to do, the save to player preferences is something that we're going to do every time we save press the save button. We're still going to save it here to our SO. Why? Because in real time, I want to be able to press the load button and load something in real time from our scriptable objects. It's faster and it's more secure, right? Whereas if I use player preferences all the time, especially when if I'm doing some kind of a lot of different things happening at the same time, I want to be selective when I do this kind of stuff, right? Even save to player preferences, we may also want to consider not doing this unless I have an application exit. If I have an application exit, right, some kind of event, right, and we can look for that event, right, then we want to save to player preferences and load from player preferences. So load from player preferences would happen at the on the start method. So something in here. So load from player preferences when the script starts. And then we want to do on application exit. So let's see if there's some kind of event that does that. So an application exit event unity, right? Which is what we want. So on application quit, perfect. On application quit, and the application is going to quit. As an example, when I close it up. So that's what I want to use. Void on application quit. Let's try that out. So that's going to be an event that I want to trigger. So public void on application quit. Okay, oops, player behavior. I want to call save to player preferences. And I think I did that right. Let's make sure. On application quit. Okay, that's how we do it. So then what you would do is load from player preferences and save to. Let's see what those look like. So I want to say, remember, we can only save strings, ints, and floats. So I can't save vectors. So I'm going to do it the long way, Michael. I'm not going to do JSON objects because you have to serialize and deserialize stuff and do some string manipulation, which is okay. Go ahead and do it. I think it's a great way of doing it. I'm going to do it the long, ugly way. So it's going to be something that looks like this. I'm going to say that, hey, player prefs dot set float, and I'm going to say the key is going to be player position x, and I'm going to pass in the float value of from our player data, right? Player data, the player position dot x. Okay, so this is long, and I'm going to do this for every float that's in here. But you need to serialize this somehow anyway. If you're going to serialize this in a string, you still need to take this and add it somehow. You still need to do somehow some serialization to serialization, which is what I'm doing here. So I want to add in the player X, Y's, and Z's. Are we only save at quit, or is it going to save player preferences with our scriptable? No, the reason why is because, well, there's two things, Russ, right? One is if I save it on the scriptable, I'm saving it every single time to player preferences. Yes, I could do that, but remember that the only time I really care about that is when I'm exiting, because in real time, it's going to be perfect. It's going to work in real time. It only messes up when I stop the application. So I'm hoping to only do it once. That's all I want to do, because that's the only time I need it, right? When I stop the application. Because it's heavy duty. It's much slower a lot of times than passing it to a scriptable object. That's why I don't want to do it every single time. All right, so that is this. And I want to do the same set floats to the rotation. So player rotation. I probably should have not copied everything, but only this part. Player rotation.x is player rotation dot x. That's the quaternion. And I want to copy 4 values, not 3 this time. So including the W value. And why? Because W value is the information that I need, right? X, Y, Z, and W. So I want to copy all those values out. Even if you're serializing, you do it this way as well. And then afterwards, you also save the player's health. So player prefs dot set int and the player's health value. I don't have to do this, but we'll call this player health, and then will be the player data dot health. So I'm getting it right from the scriptable object. All right. So as opposed to whatever that's currently in the scriptable object, that's what's going to be saved out to player prefs. All right, and then on the other way, that's serializing. We need to deserialize on the way back out. So again, it's kind of the same thing. I'm going to copy all this, but it's the other way around. I'm going to say that we are going to get float. So that is these ones, right? And this is get int And these things are defaults. That's what these are. We can leave it this way, but that doesn't make any sense. What I'd rather do is take this stuff and put it here, and we'll fix it in a second. I'm just going to do that copy paste jobby. I'm going to do. And in a few seconds, we'll have everything that is what it looks like. So this is deserializing, right? So serializing, encoding, and deserializing, decoding, right? So we have everything we have once in a while. We're only going to do it again twice, once at load and once at quit, right? So that way there's no, not a lot of signal passing between the device and everything we're doing. And I want to see if this works. I want to see if, like, we have a hard cut as an example, will it detect the application changes? And like Russ said, we may, as a safety valve, we may want to also do that during saves, because what if I have a, I don't know, power outage, my phone dies, would the application quit? Will it quit gracefully, or will it just stop and there won't be an event? We won't get this on application quit event. And if that doesn't happen, then we need to do it every save. All right, so that's what this is doing. Let's try it first on application quit and then see what happens when we do the rest. So this is the very blunt force, brute force application, load from preferences, save to. One thing we need for saving was we also need the player prefs, playerprefs.save. We need that as well, which kind of forces everything, flushes the buffer onto the into the player preferences, which is important. All right, so that is this part. Okay, let's test it now. So save this, go back and test it. Let's go back to the file and run it. And when we're done running, then we can see that, okay, I want to do the same thing I did before, run. Now this, unfortunately, there are no player preferences locally, right? So we can't really prove it out here. This runs and there's no errors. That's what I wanted to test with. But we can do a build settings, and I want to go to my emulator and build and run at this point. Before we go there, please always, when we do some player preferences or anything that we're affecting the device, please save everything. That would be a very bad thing not to save stuff. Build and run now, and this way you have less chance of you losing code. Let's see what happens. So again, during operation in real time, we're using our scriptable object. But if there's an application quit or on application load, it's going to load from player preferences and save to player preferences. So hopefully that'll allow us to do some kind of persistent data. And again, you may agree, disagree. These are just strategies I'm discussing with you anyway. There are other methods as well, all right? But for example, if you write a DLL, you could write your own library that does binary loading and saving on a mobile device with C++. That's on you if you want to try and do that. All right, so here we are. We're going to back up here, and we're going to jump, right? And we're going to run, and we're going to jump, and we're going to run again. And I just want to get to the point where I can see that not a wall, but actually something that makes more sense. Let's do jump, and okay, and let's look at the stairs. Yay, that's a nice scene to look at. And save, cool, close, right? They close the file off, a rough cut. Let's see what happens if we quit and I run the game again. So run, and we launch everything, and I want to go to save or load, then I go back to this. And that wasn't exactly what I wanted, right? We were in a different spot than this. So what happened? Did it actually do the quitting? Did it get everything? What happened?
It helped with that 0 as well.
Yeah, that's really weird, isn't it? Right, so that's something that's really weird that happened. If I load again, I'm in this strange position, right? And that is not what I expected. So what happened? Going back. So we did all that really quick, like super quick, right? And First of all, just for playability, I don't like the player position here. It's like against the wall. So let's just change the player. It's bugging me. Sorry. I want to be able to see something else other than this. This back here or something. Even if it's like this. That's good. That's better than watching a wall. So save. All right. So that is this part. Let's also turn off the, I don't want to see the markers. So I don't see the minimap markers. Save that. Okay, so let's try it again, but let's think about doing what Russ said. So let's go back to our code. Because maybe application quit just did not work, right? We just, when we flushed out of the application, it didn't do what it's supposed to do. And on application start, when the start method was called, load from player preferences somehow didn't load everything. Let's make sure that these things look right. So get float to player rotation X, Y, Z, and W, X, Y, Z, player position. Make sure these all compute. X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z, and W, right? We output player health to player health, and these are floats, and this is an int. And we're going to go save. Let's do the same thing, but this time save to player preferences. We're also going to do on the on save button pressed event. This one. So we're going to do both on application quit and this. Let's see if this will do it, because we had an abrupt quit and that didn't do it, right? And he says it probably didn't load because they didn't exist. The preferences never got created, right? And makes sense, right? All right, so let's save that and try it again. So come on, and we'll go and build and run the same device. And although I don't like it that it saves every time I click save, it saves to player preferences, and it also saves when an application quit, even if I don't save to player preferences. And you may not want that, all right? But you got to think about games nowadays, right? And you want somehow, if you quit the application, so it remembers where you were, right? Sometimes also, I know that other games nowadays, they set a spawn point in the game. That's kind of like what we're doing when we look at something and, we set a spawn point, like a save point or whatever. And it really depends on what you want to do. Let's see how this works now. Okay, so we're here, and I want to back up even more, and I want to look somewhere else over here in space, and I've got a different position, and I want to go to save, and then I drastically quit. Okay, cool. So then now what happens? So let's load that up. And now let's load, and we're good. So that's the magic bullet. The magic bullet is we need to save every time, not just on application quit. Application quit doesn't seem to know what to do, but this works fine. All right, so this is the way we would do it. I still think we don't need to do the scriptable objects. I wouldn't make the scriptable object work on, on load, because remember, even inside the game, on load, it only happens once, right? So if I was to load the player preferences now again, so let's say, for example, I go here and jump, 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 and then I run away from these guys. Run away, run away, run away, right? Let's just say I'm just using my one button. And then they come at me and I click load. That loads. It doesn't go to the, to the player preferences to load that. And that was instant, right? So that's pretty good. Again, some user interface tricks we can definitely do here. When we load, do we want to show a, game loaded? Do we want to transition the player, to another screen, where we get them a chance to warm up a little bit, give them a little bit of vulnerability frames as they're loading. All these things are other considerations that we haven't really talked about here, but that's not the topic of this discussion. The topic is, can we load and save stuff, right? Now, I really love Michael's suggestion, because Michael's suggestion opens up a whole possibility of saving more detail than just one thing. And remember, what we want to do is we want to save something to some kind of JSON format to string, right? So what we do is we format an object as a JSON object, right? Somehow. And then after we have a JSON object, we stringify it. And once we stringify it, that is the serialization. And then we deserialize it back into JSON, where we, or not, we just leave it as a string. We don't even use JSON format if you don't want to, as long as the string is saved in some kind of format that you can you serialize. So example, let's say I was going to bring up Notepad, and my string is going to look exactly in the way that I want to do it. So I don't care about the actual names. I don't care about that because I'm saving a string, and the string is going to have like a kind of a template. I can just say, all right, well, at first I want to save the X, Y, and Z locations for my player. So let's say 1.17, and then maybe comma separated 1.19 or 1.9, and some kind of, on the Z-axis, I don't know, 0.7 or something, and then a space followed by the rotations, right? 0.5 or 0.4 on the Y-axis, 0.0, something like that. Comma separated string like this is okay, or even on the next line where you have different a way of serializing. So every property is its own line. I mean, it's totally fine to do it this way. So that way you have X rotation, whatever, and let's say 60 health. So that would be your player data, and you take this information, you parse it per line, and you bring it back out as a string, and it's only one string that you're saving and loading, one entry in your player preferences, as opposed to a million of them like Rust would have, right? Because Rust would have to take care of many positions and many things, and here you'd have a method of serializing and deserializing. And probably what you'd want to do is even break it down further. If I was going to do a serialization this way, where I want to serialize a vector into string, and they actually have that with the toString method. So let's do that. So remember that if I want to save a vector as a string, then going back to my code here, not that code, going back to my code here, if I want to serialize something, so let's suppose this is my serialization function, and I want to take my vector and put it as a string, then it's as simple as saying, okay, I have my player position, player data dot player position, and then dot toString, and that's serialized as a string. It becomes a string. And so what does this look like? As an example. And then what if we want to bring it in from a string? That's the challenge. The challenge is not going to a string. Let's log this out. So let's do a console log, which is a debug.log, sorry. JavaScript. My brain is JavaScript today. Extra brace. All right, and what does this look like? And if you've ever tried this, you'll see, right? So if I run this, I'll just run it locally here, so you can see what this looks like. So if I press save, and we're going to get this with brackets and everything, right? 2.2, 1.1, negative 14.6. We get this out there with brackets, and then what you can do is you can have some kind of, this is your first step. So you get some kind of string, and then what you do is you strip the brackets out, you save it onto into the string itself, and so that would be your vector. You have a little function that does that outputs a vector, and then on the way in, that's the challenge. How do you read a string and get it from a string into a vector? So convert like a vector to string. Oh, sorry, from a string to a vector, right? How do you do that? And that's a custom function. You'd have a get a string, and whatever the string is, and then you'd read in, like you'd say something like to vector, like something like this, and then pass in a string, whatever the string is. You pass in this thing, and you convert it back to a vector. And that little convenience function with to string and to vector, this is the one you'd have to worry about. Then you can make vectors and quaternions and other stuff if you want to, incoming from a string and to a string. And that would save you a pile of trouble, and you can save more than one piece of information as opposed to one thing at a time. The only thing that I would have loved is if, the player prefs also allowed you to store out some kind of custom object like a struct. That would be awesome, but it doesn't do it. All right, any questions around the strategies here? So this is the second one, second version. There are other things we can do, like using Firebase or some kind of Unity cloud or something like that, but we're not going to do that today. So for the lab, what I want you to show me is a couple of screenshots to show me that you can load and save here just as practice. That's all I'm looking for. Nothing too crazy, guys.
How would you show loading and saving in a screenshot?
Just take some meditation. Say, here's where I was before. I click load. Here's where I am again. Here's saving. I went to this position. You can show the position.
You could just do like a quick minute video.
Yeah, if you really want to, but don't. I mean, it's just too much work. You know what I'm saying? Or debug log output. I like how Russ said that's fine too. Right. So, but just kind of show it. It's just really practice for you, Michael. I think you get the gist for most people here. It's not meant to be oppressive in any way. These things are just like practice for you, and gives you ideas. Turn into no, Russ, no comic. But turn it into something that's easier, not a comic, right? So I'm going to say that use player preferences to save between app loads. Git push. So again, I don't think it's wrong, and a great use of, like I said, scriptable objects to me is defaults. So again, if you notice this little thing right here, this is a great way of keeping defaults for items. So I want a default for an item. I want a default for a starting character, a default for levels. I want all the stuff, instead of me hard coding something inside of my in my code somewhere, I can literally read it from here like a small little database. And I would break it down into data, like data folders. Like in this example, will be stored data. So you have different kinds of items, and those items are something that you don't write to, but rather read from. And then you might have some items that are modifiable that are part of the player's inventory. So there's something that you'd want to keep track of. Inventory between loads, you definitely want to go out to something like player prefs, right? Where you don't want to keep that, because imagine like losing all your stuff between loads. You save, and then you close down your thing, and let's say your phone reboots for an update or something, and then you come back and all your stuff is gone. That would make you pretty mad. Right? So I think on mobile, this solves the problem that we're looking at. And I think this is what we've accomplished our goal for today, which is saving and loading to a device. Right? Are there more elegant methods? Yes, we could certainly develop serialization and deserialization. There are ways of also doing it, but on mobile, and if you search them, if you search on saving and loading on mobile, saving and loading on mobile, Unity, right? And if you look at some of this stuff, there's not a solid answer from Unity as opposed to looking at the forum. So I found that saving and loading with scriptable objects, it even says that. I'm not an expert, but advice, check out scriptable objects. Look, this guy doesn't know. This is 2017 and he hasn't tried it. Android game save and load Unity answers. Let's see what they say. So if you search through it, it's not like there's a great pile of information on what to do. Player preferences is what this guy's using, right? And that's really cool. Has key, if it already exists, you can check player preferences to see if it exists first, and then get it. And that would have probably saved us, Russ, if we did a has key on load. If it was something that was not empty, then we can load what we have, as opposed to what was there. So lots of stuff, but notice that those are the two things that they talk about everywhere: saving and loading, a game in Unity. Now this Ray Wenderlich, it doesn't matter if you look at this, he talks about different things: a database, some memory, or a file. Those are the things. Memory would be your scriptable object. File would be your user preferences. Database would be like something like Firebase. And I recommend Firebase if you're going to do something online. I'm not sure if they're going to handle it here in this little video or in this little tutorial, but the idea is something that we've just handled. right? So I think this is a good way of doing it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And again, I think there's more than one way of doing everything, but which is why I wanted to propose to you something that works. There's your JSON, saving data with JSON, Michael, where you have a JSON file and you save stuff. But I mean, I'm not sure if you want to go to this level of detail, because again, you'd have to deserialize. So save as JSON. Look, he's got a little bit of a serialization function where we JSON utility dot to JSON, right? But how do you get it back from JSON? That's the challenge, right? So here's from JSON, from save, JSON utility. So that's kind of something that they already have, they built in. To JSON, from JSON, where you get information and you store it inside of a save class, where save, it comes from JSON, and you put in the type, which is save. And so when you're serializing it out and on deserializing it in, save would be your class that you're getting in from. So this is kind of interesting, where you're casting the type that you're getting in. So you'd have some kind of thing where, in this case, it'd be your scriptable object. Not a bad idea, right? In terms of how it's loading and saving. So is there something out there that helps us with Unity? Absolutely. Is there more than one way of doing it? For sure. Hopefully that was helpful for you. And this is something that I wanted to do in terms of our lab today, because you are going to have to do this for your game, 100%. And you're going to have to do it for other things, configuration details, themes that you switch to, volume settings that the player wants to remember. Name it, you're going to have to remember it for the player. And that way the player has the same experience that they're used to in all games that you play, right? Especially on mobile. All right, guys, that's it. Any questions in terms of what we've talked about today? Because that's the lab for today. It's a very short one, but I think it's a good one. All right, guys, I'm going to let you go early today. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week. Good luck on your lab. And next week, we're going to talk about organic characters and how to make them work properly with many, many different kinds of animations, and how to use the animation system with blending, and all kinds of really cool stuff. Okay, so we'll talk to you next week. Hit me up on Discord if you have questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. See you next week.
Take care.